Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to another stream with one of my favorite people ever, Dan from the Voice of Geekdom channel here on YouTube. And we bring an amazing, great. I know I say that all the time, so it kind of gets old, but we're here tonight to talk about the fall of Gondolin and the King of Gondolin, Turgon. Dan, how excited are you for this topic and why?
I'm 200% excited, and the reason why is because it's another great character, another great first age Lord of the Noldor.
Exactly. And this is our series of baddies and goodies, good warriors, bad warriors, not judging their fighting power, rather judging their character. And as last time we talked about Sauron, we decided to go for a goodie. And yeah, I'm the thing is why I'm most excited about him is because the first age and the second age is mainly about the Silmarils, or the first age, and also the great tales, they're all interwoven in that. But Gondolin has its own curses going on, and I find that fascinating. And it's a bit interwoven in all the other great tales and the Silmarillion, but it's also very standalone-ish, I would say. And so, yeah, it's not for nothing. My Twitter handle is I'd rather be in Gondolin, obviously before the fall. And yeah, it's literally my favorite part of the Legendarium.
He's a character that I think of as a battlefield general. So he's a character who leads the troops into battle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's a king as well as a warrior, but he's a brave elf, I would say.
He is, but then it is very weird that often he decides to go into hiding and secrecy. And we'll talk about that, why he decides to do that. This, again, has to do with the curse and prophecies he's hearing and dreams Avala gives him. But yeah, it's very, like, as you say, during an important battle of the First Age where many, many heroes did fall, he didn't fall, and he was a great warrior during that battle, but he also retreated and went back to his hidden city. And yeah, he went back into hiding because he knew he had a role in the story to fulfill and a job to do, or his daughter had a job to do. Yeah, so overall, this is why I really love this character of Turgon. And I mean, the thing is, we will talk a lot about the fall of Gondolin and Gondolin in general, and that is so interwoven with the character of Turgon. But he didn't start in Gondolin. So let's start maybe in the beginning.
So he was born in the Years of the Trees, wasn't he?
Yes.
He was a high elf Noldor from Valinor.
Yes, he was the second son of Fingolfin, one of the three OG Noldorian princes. And yes, so his sister was Aradel. She'll play an important role in the story later on, and she's one of my favorite characters. And he had another brother, Argon. So he's from a very important line, and he even later becomes, mainly in name, but still he becomes one of the High Kings of the Noldor, one of the many.
I think he has the shortest reign of all the High Kings, doesn't he?
He does.
Doesn't last long in the role, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But
no, he doesn't. And he takes it on from his brother after Fingon's death. And that is, as you say, it's not that long compared, in Elven time. But why is he also so important, and the line he created? Because here for, one of the few times another elven house mingles into the Noldorian line, a Vanya elf, a princess of the Vanya, Elenwe, and he marries her, obviously still in Aman, and she's basically the only full-blooded Vanya, that, because Galadriel and some others, they have Vanya blood, but she's a full-blooded Vanya princess. And
And his mother was Vanyar as well, so that means his
yes,
children are more than half Vanyar.
they are more Vanya than, and you see it in Idril actually, in her looks. And yes, and so she is the only Vanya, full-blooded Vanya, that decides to take part in the flight of the Noldor, and that is part of the curse of the Noldor. So that is very interesting, I find, because what we know of the Vanya is, they decided to live their lives with the gods, and they were separated from the fate of the world and from the dealings of the world most of the story, but she was not. And as we said, it is an important role she plays. Sadly, we don't know that much about her.
No, we don't know anything about her character. She dies early, so.
Yeah, and that is, one of the first events in Turgon's life we learn about, and it's a tragic one, as so often in the First Age, because she dies, after Fëanor and his brood burnt the ships. The rest of the Noldor, they most of them don't decide to turn back and go back to Valinor, that shameful coming back and pleading for forgiveness. They decide to keep going and to reach Middle-earth. And there was a land part where you could do it, but it was a gruesome journey, and a lot of elves die. And the elf that is named to die is actually his wife. So Elenwyd basically it's described as she drowns. She and the daughter, actually.
That's right. Yeah, I was going to say. So Idril is there in the water too, and he can only say one of them, and he has to choose basically.
Yeah, and this is literally one of the, and it's water. I mean, I don't want to be too tinfoily here, but I want to ask you this question, because we will learn later that the Lord of the Waters, Ulmo, the Valar of the Waters, he will play a big role in all this cursing and solving curses and helping out the house of Fingolfin and the house of Tuor. He's literally aiding them. So he decides to, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a parent. I can't say how parents would feel. Would you rather save your wife or your child? I don't know. And it is interesting he saved the daughter, because, again, she had an important, and you have this feeling so many times during this book. When you read the book, you have the feeling, oh, wow, this was meant to be. But did somebody play a role, like somebody like Ulmo? Did he have a role in those decisions that were made? And this is the first time I felt that. Could you agree? Did you notice that as well, or are you like,
I've
what
never
are you
thought
talking
about
about?
this, but it's a good question. We don't get any definite sense of there being some sort of intervention that
No.
results in Elenwe ending up in the water. It seems to be just a natural occurrence. I suppose maybe a better question would be, is Eru Ilúvatar responsible, really, rather than is Ulmo? Because I don't get the sense that Ulmo would just do that just to set things up for the future. But then we're getting into the question of how much agency do the Valar have, and what is predestination, and what does it mean in this world? The deep questions.
The deep shit.
Yeah. So I don't have the answers, but I would say that it's one of those things where it's part of the marring of Arda for there to be a Helcaraxe in the first place, and we're told in the Ainulindalë that Melkor is responsible for the extremes of temperature that result in icy regions and volcanoes, and so what we've got is kind of like an epic scale narrative of the formation of the world, which is marred by the Dark Lord.
Yes.
And then we have this idea of eucatastrophe and things swinging back round, and Melkor's actions contributing to the greater glory in the long term, and of his work contributing to the glory of the music.
Yeah.
And so, songs were sung about the crossing of the Hel Caraxe. It was a valorous deed that was renowned, and tales were told about it for generations, and the elves always remembered it. But there was hardship, and there was death and suffering.
Yeah,
So
but the thing is that makes a life worth living, because then you appreciate things. And this is how I always saw the marrying of Ada, because the thing is, if it would just have been and stayed like the Vala planned it to be, this is what Tolkien actually says, then it wouldn't be, life is maybe more beautiful with imperfections, because, then you see then you see perfection if you know imperfection, and good when you know evil, all these concepts that you need light and darkness. And this is how I always saw it. But yeah, I mean, let's not go too deep and too far off topic. But yeah, this was the first time I was like, okay, this is the first choice, because I'm very much in the great tales. There are many stories of choices, people having choices. Just saying Turin, and. And you see that here for the first time, because the story would have been completely different. There would not have been an Eärendil. Morgoth would probably not have been defeated, because Eärendil wouldn't have gone to the Vala and played with them. There's a whole plot behind this. So if he would have saved his wife, the story would have been very different. And yeah, I find that cool, those little hidden details. But going back, so he saves his daughter, and he didn't straight away build the hidden city of Gondolin. They went to Vinyamar, which will become very important later on. But yeah, it was a beautiful city. They weren't there too long. Overall,
about 100 years or so at the beginning, wasn't it?
Yeah. So literally at the beginning of the First Age, they went to Vinyamar, and the dream him and his cousin had to build Nargothrond, two strongholds for the elves, Nargothrond and Gondolin. It was like 50-50 in the First Age. So just a few years. Just a few years later. Overall, the story of Gondolin, compared to the length of the First and Second and Third Age, is a very short one, actually, because it literally just stood for 400 something years, so not really long. It was not like 1,000-year-old city, sadly. But yeah, so he had that dream. And now comes back into play what I was talking about earlier, Ulmo giving him the dream.
So here, Ulmo really does intervene. It's clear. It's interesting though, because what happens is, so he kind of teams up with Finrod. Sorry. So he meets up with his cousin Finrod, who he's dwelling in Tol Sirion, which is the island fortress which is built on the
shores,
on the island in the middle of the lake, kind of very close to where Gondolin will eventually be built, on the river Sirion. And so they travel down the river together, and then they get kind of restful and sleepy, and then they go to sleep on the banks of the river in the region called the Meres of Twilight, which I'm assuming is probably called that after the fact, after what happens there, because it's a very convenient name, if not. And so they fall asleep there, and Ulmo comes down the river, and they dream a dream, and Ulmo is he kind of appears to them in a dream, and it's not clear whether he's like kind of telepathically going into their dreams, or whether he's like kind of whispering into their ears and they're dreaming, or I think he is there in person, isn't he, Ulmo? Like
I would say so, yeah. Although we know
it says he comes down the river, doesn't it, in the summer?
Yeah, because it's water. So I would say yes, because we know Ulmo didn't like to leave water. Like, he didn't like to go to Aman, to all these counselings. He did never go to the Ring of Doom, the Mahanaxa. Well, he went once or twice when he really had to, but he didn't like to.
I come back to this moment quite a lot in other moments, actually, where there's prophetic dreams that happen in the Legendarium, because
Yeah.
a lot of the time, even in, the Lord of the Rings, there's a few dreams that are kind of seem like Valerian
Yes.
intervention. A lot of the time, they happen near bodies of water. And
Yeah.
that's quite noticeable when you
The
know
drowning
about
of
this story.
Numenor and who had the dream? Faramir had the dream. Yeah.
Faramir and
So
Boromir as well, and that was near the shores of Anduin, wasn't it? So,
yes. Yeah. So is he giving those people? It's also very fairy tale like, don't you think? Like them sleeping and have it's literally like a fairy tale story could start.
yeah, very much so. And you also you think about the way that the Nazgul can't handle water,
Yes.
and that's very fairy tale too. And it's also, you
Yeah.
think, it's probably connected with Ulmo,
Yes, and later Gothmog,
and
spoiler, Gothmog, basically drowning in the fountain again, water, a creature of fire and water. It's also very
so it's a
interesting.
whole elemental game, and it's funny how the water seems to be connected to dreams and also to
Yeah.
music. We're told
Yes.
that the music of the Ainur
Is in the
is
waters.
in the
Yeah.
water, and you can hear it in the water, and the elves hear water in a different way than humans do. Even
Yes. Yeah.
humans can hear it, but they can't hear it in quite the same
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
somehow.
And they trust water. This is like, remember Elwing later on, she casts herself into water and again gets rescued. I mean, spoiler, but again gets rescued. She could have drowned or whatever, but she trusted this. So it's actually really cool.
But it's interesting what Olmo does here, because he kind of appears to them both separately,
Yes.
and then in the Silmarillion we're told that they both have kind of slightly fuzzy memories of the
Yeah.
experience, and
Yeah.
then they don't communicate to one another, so they don't.
No.
Neither one of them tells the other that they'd
Yeah.
had this dream,
Yeah.
and then they go their separate ways. Finrod goes to Doriath and tells, of all people, Thingol, my favourite elf.
Not.
He tells Thingol what happened. I think this is years later when he tells him, but if, he tells him about the caverns of Narog and the caverns there, which have. There are no dwarves that have a claim to those. He doesn't mention that anybody else has a legitimate claim to that region.
No.
could be useful information, Thingol, but I don't blame Finrod for what happens with the dwarves. I blame Thingol. It's another one of Thingol's.
No,
But
this was the dwarf's fault. I mean, stop blaming Thingol for this one, please. But
that's enough.
anyway,
We're gonna have to come to some sort of, I think, decision on how we're gonna talk about dwarves from now on, because I think we're gonna have to sort this one out on my channel at some point.
yes. So you will bring on Matt, who will defend the dwarves.
I haven't asked him yet, but I'm going to this week, I think.
Yes, from the Nut of the Rings, and you will bring on Helen, who will not defend the dwarves. Let's say that. Anyway, going back to the story.
Going back to the story, so Ulmo appears to both of them, and
Yeah.
with Turgon, he revisits him later on and makes everything much clearer. He revisits him in person and says, "Okay, this is what I meant, and this is where you have to go, and this is what you have to do," and he does it. But Finrod kind of, doesn't get any extra guidance, and he doesn't seem to need it. So why the difference? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, because Finrod's fate is interwoven in the other curse. It's the curse of Hurin's family. I do think that is very, and he even lets these fate meet in which is like the coolest, how's that called, cameo ever, when Turin and Hurin meet. They don't really meet. They don't know each other. They don't maybe
Turin
know of each.
and Tuor, you mean?
Tuor, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Tour. And they meet walking past each other, which is kind of cool. I do think those are separate stories. I think Nargothrond and that story, Children of Húrin, that's another cast that is that has to play another role in the Legendarium, and then Turin later will come into play in the Dagorach. He has his role to play later on. I strongly do think that, but Tor has to play a complete. So the whole story of Gondolin is another curse and is another part of the.
They're
Do you
both
know what?
necessary parts of the plan, I guess.
Of the greater plan to kill Morgoth, but they needed to separate. I do think if they would have, built one city together, that would have fallen way earlier, because the bigger the city and the more people know of the city, I think the earlier Morgoth would have learned of it. And the thing is, Finrod was close to the humans. He had to play this part in the Beren and Luthien story, to found the line of Aragorn and all. Yeah, I see that completely differently. That is more the
Well, I mean, in a way, they're both of those stories form that
found the
line, don't
house of
they?
Aragorn. They do, yeah. But they will meet up later on
Later on, yeah.
again. Yeah. No, but you're right. At least he tells us more about Gondolin than Nargothrond. We don't know. I mean, in Children of Húrin, in the standalone book, you learn quite a lot about Turin's time in Nargothrond and why it fell. Because actually, the king didn't want the city to be, in the open, and he didn't want to fight in the open, just like Turgon didn't want to. But yeah, well, Turin
Yeah, it's
convinced him.
almost the opposite problem, isn't it? Because Maeglin is the one that convinces Turgon to close his gates and
Yes.
And to lock up, and it's the other way around. Turin convinces him to go out and into battle in the open field, and that's how Nargothrond falls.
Yeah, and the bloody bridge. Just saying. Yes. So let's come to a super important part now. He builds the city in, I think, 116 of the First Age. So just a few years later, and the city is built in secret. And now you're like, okay, how can you build a whole city? Like, it's a gigantic city, it's not like small thing. We didn't know about the size of his army and the people living, but I assume that was, for me, it was way bigger in how I imagine it than Nargothrond or any stronghold of the elves at that time. I think, and you see that in the size of the army and how the army is described. I would say, because the other princes of the Noldor, Feanor's sons, they had in Himling, in all those little, in Maglor's Gap, and where they were scattered all over Middle Earth, and those cities were way smaller. I would assume Gondolin would have been one of the biggest strongholds.
You suspect so, don't you? It certainly seems to be described as such.
Yeah. And he built it in secret, and the eagles, very interesting. The eagles are kind of also helping and guarding it, which is really cool, because who sends the eagles? Manwë. And but still, they are part of the curse of the Noldor, because Fingolfin is their father. I mean, yes, they didn't partake in the kinslaying, that line. But still, they're part of the curse, which is interesting when you know that the eagles protect them.
Not all of them are condemned in quite the same way, are they?
No, they're not.
So,
no.
Fingon, his brother, did actually take part in the kinslaying, but he was tricked into it by circumstance, because he arrived late to the battle.
And he thought the Teleri were attacking the Noldor, so that is very different from attacking first.
Whereas Turgon was even less guilty, because he wasn't even there. He didn't get there in time, and he was reluctant to leave. He spoke against Feanor at the Oath of Feanor and the speech, and he spoke against him. And the public opinion went against him and his father, who both spoke against Feanor. Which is unfortunate. So, and you get this profound sense of homesickness from this character as well, because when he does get to Middle Earth, when he gets to Beleriand, we're told that Gondolin is built in the likeness of Tirion, which is it says it all. And he builds a kind of new version of the two trees as well.
The two tree, exactly.
I don't remember the names, but they actually emit light as well.
Yes, I will read from a line of from the Silmarillion about the city, and there's literally a picture of the two trees of Valinor in the halls of the king, which is cool. So as you say, it's the White City. It's like Tyrion upon Tuna is said to have like the streets were kind of paved in gold and glittering, and the way Tolkien describes Gondolin people is so beautiful. Like really read about it. It's really cool. It has 12 houses, which is very, it kind of gives you all this medieval, blue-blooded family vibes. And but it was not, they were not really fighting each other or anything, but you had all these houses in one city. So it must have been big, because each of that house
they're
had
not
an
fighting
army.
each other, but you do get the sense of it being political with the
Oh,
houses,
100%. When Maeglin comes into the game, and we'll talk about that now, but just about the houses. So there were 12 houses. I'm not going through all of the houses, but they all have their own sigil, which tells us a lot about the house, and they have really cool names. So talking about Maeglin, he was the House of the Mole, and I'm like, who wants to be in the House of the Mole? Because
it's also another convenient name, isn't it?
Tolkien tells us everything by naming things. So I mean,
because he is literally Melkor's mole, isn't he?
He is, yes, he is. There is the House of the Golden Flower, and Gondolin. Just to give a short overview of who lived in Gondolin. We talked on your channel just a week ago about Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor lived in Gondolin. Interesting side note. Another, like many, if you would name epic warriors of the First Age, elven warriors, or even human warriors, because they lived there as well. Hurin were there, Hur, there lived a very important elf who was reincarnated later, who had his role to play in the Witch King has. It was Glorfindel. He lived in Gondolin, and again, he was related to Tuor, that we know of. I would say his mother, Glorfindel's mother, I just forgot her name now, was a sister of Fingolfin. So they were very close related. Then there were other epic warriors like Exelion of the Fountain, and he will play a very important role later on. But he was said to be one of the greatest warriors the elves did ever see. And he had a really cool helmet, which would come in handy later on, the form of the helmet. There was Eglamoth, who was I think he was he had the bow, and he was also one of the best and strongest fighters, or elven fighter of the First Age. So they had and this foreshadows what will happen later on, and sadly all of them die. So all of these really cool houses with really cool names and sigils. And just a short thing, so the house of the Exelion was near the fountain, near the King's Square. Look it up. I will be too lazy to put a map into this stream because I can't be asked. But look up the streets and everything, the shape of Gondolin.
In the Fall of Gondolin storyline in the Book of Lost Tales, we have which isn't entirely canon, but kind of semi-canon. We have
a map
even.
Map. Yeah, there's a map. I have it somewhere here, but yeah, it's really cool. And so his house was kind of, I would say, Exelion was kind of the king's guard of Tuor. That was very symbolic, his house being near the square. Yeah, I don't have it here, but I'll find it. So those were the 12 houses. There were lots of gates surrounding, because Gondolin had one law. Gondolin had the law, it had to stay hidden. How do you stay hidden? Nobody can enter, nobody can leave. which
I find this far-fetched that the Gondolin would be hidden for as long as it was.
yeah,
Slightly,
yeah,
you can't really picture that working, can you, in reality?
no.
But it's a fairy tale. So.
It is a fairy tale, exactly. But something interesting with one of my favorite characters happens because Dora the Explorer, she got bored. And, she was living in this beautiful city, but she wasn't older, she wanted to conquer, well, realms of her own. She wanted to visit the Sons of Fëanor, actually, because she was friends with them. And she asked her brother to be able to leave the city, and now like not not listening to your own rule, to your own laws, he let her go, in guarded by these named warriors. I think Exelion and I think even Glorfindel went with her, but they lost her due to, well, kind of an enchantment of an elf. And this, like, I think now the downfall begins with the story of Aridel.
Don't they lose it earlier than that though? They lose her to the brood of Ungoliant, don't they? When they're in
Oh, they lose her earlier, before Eol.
when
Yeah,
they're
you're
in
right. She's very,
Nan Dungoltheb, I think
yeah,
it's called.
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah,
But yeah, I mean, ultimately she gets lost because of the enchantments of Eol later on.
yes, yeah.
But
So
yeah,
what
they
happens there? What is your version of that story? Why does she fall in love with him? Is something sketchy going on there, Dan?
definitely something sketchy going on. Yeah, I mean, he entraps her, doesn't he? He basically
Yes.
makes it impossible for her to leave,
Yeah.
and
Which is
kind of
very Ungoliant-like, by the way.
yeah. I mean, basically he kind of traps her, and it is like a kind of predatorial thing to do that he does.
Yeah.
We're told in the Silmarillion version, we're told that she's not entirely unwilling, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
it's not as if it's not as if he trigger warning. Shall I say that word?
Yeah, he doesn't rape her or
Yeah,
anything. No, that's not it. But it is how he implies
but
it
but
is
in
that,
earlier versions, it kind of seems like he did though,
mm,
because it seems like the enchantment was even more stronger and was kind of consent
yeah.
ruining, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
Um,
no, definitely. Yeah, this is why you have such a weird feeling about him from the beginning, even before you know of him and learn of him.
yeah.
And
Anyway, in any event, and in any version of the story, he's a super skeevy, like dodgy guy who,
creepy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and he literally lives in the dark. He lives in the dark and just
Yeah.
doesn't, you know,
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
lives in a cave basically,
Yeah.
of his own choosing,
Yeah. He's
and
related, by the way, to Thingol somehow. We don't really
yeah,
know.
we don't know how, but yeah.
And he, I mean, alone his deeds, he's the forger of the black sword, Anglachel, Gurthang, named later on, that kills, Belek, that later kills Turin himself, that is responsible. I mean, it killed Glaurung,
Killed
so good
Glaurung,
on,
so it killed
good
a
on,
baddie as well.
it caught one baddie. But yeah, it alone, his deeds, and he was a great, don't get me wrong, he was a great craftsman, and he was friends with the dwarves, which is kind of, I mean, cool there, because there were not that many elves that were friends with the dwarves during that time. Yeah, the more. But yeah, he was very friendly with the dwarves, and he was called Eol the Dark Elf, like you said. This is where he lived, and he was not. It's not like he's evil or he's a vampire or something. Although I really like the fan art of literally him being portrayed as a vampire. Kind of here for that, but
Yeah, there is a similar kind of archetype like going on there, though, isn't there? I mean,
it is, yes.
vampires are often sort of seen as kind of sexual predator kind of
Draining the
metaphors.
energy and blood out of,
Yeah,
sucking the life out. Yeah, and this is what he did, and this
and
is why
and there's the shunning of darkness, of course, and
yes,
there's a
yeah,
lot of parallels there.
yeah. Maybe he liked Bram Stoker, so we don't know.
Mm.
And yeah, so going on, that is one of my questions I had for you. She doesn't stay long there. So do you feel
Mm.
that the spell kind of lessens and she kind
No,
of
I
begins to?
don't. I don't think she was under mental domination. I don't think there was a spell in her head. I think she was
Do you
entrapped
really
there,
think? Because
and
what did Glaurung? Look what Glaurung did. Look what Glaurung did to Ninel and to Turin.
I'm not saying
He,
it's impossible. I'm not saying there isn't precedence for there being mental domination going on, and
yeah,
we know that Morgoth has that kind of power too,
yeah,
with his eyes.
yeah.
Um, but I don't think Ael did anything like that. But he comes pretty close, though.
Yeah.
I think he's more of a real world predator in that he kind of
Mhm.
gaslights her
Mhm. And his son. Mhm.
and he definitely abuses his son.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it's
Um,
very reminiscent, elves stay together for the rest of their lives. I mean, there are some exceptions, when the wife chooses to die and stuff like that, but still, normally, elves stay together. But she literally decides to flee, and this is not like she just wants to go for a holiday to see her brother. She wants to leave with her son. Because yes, I mean, also his attitude, which I find so fascinating, because it's not just her falling for a bad guy under a spell, not
mhm,
under a spell, whatever. It's him falling in love with the Noldor. We know he
mhm.
hates the Noldor.
Yes.
And so isn't that like she is the sister or the daughter of a Noldorian king, a Noldorian prince? And he blames them that all the orcs, just like Thingol does, all the orcs and Morgoth came back to Middle Earth because, all the dealings with the Silmarils, and they blame the Noldor for that. So he actually hates the Noldor, but then he marries the daughter or the sister of a king. What?
Mm.
I mean, good. So, yes, she decides to leave her husband. Very, well, uncommon for elves, let's say that. And she wants to go back, run back to her brother, which is, well, in a way, also not very elven-like, But yeah, she wants to
Not
go
at
back.
all. Elves usually, like traditionally, they will stay together for life. So a bond
Mm,
is for life, and it's supposed to be. We have the whole thing with Feanor's mother when she dies and
yeah,
refuses to come back, and then Finway's like, "I'm stuck now as a bachelor forever. What am I going to do?"
yeah,
We have that whole problem, and since then
yeah,
it was decreed that elves would be together for life,
yeah,
elven couplings, and
yeah.
in the event of that kind of situation repeating itself, they're allowed to remarry, which is the
Hmm.
start of the problem in some ways. But this isn't
Hmm.
about that. This is about elves,
Hmm.
and elves, traditionally they stay together for life, and a
Yeah.
commitment is a commitment. And
And mothers don't want to separate the sons or the children from the father. Again, that is even in, not just for elves, even in Tolkien's time, that was very, like, ooh, it's a hot topic, let's say that.
yeah,
But yes, she wants to go back, and she brings them all
and yeah, and
in.
who can blame her? I mean, she is the victim of a predator, and so is her son.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And well, she goes back. She obviously still knows the way back. And they are like the guards let them through all the gates because obviously they know who this woman is. They've never met Meglin. Meglin never met his family before, or that side of the family before. And yeah, they come back to Gondolin, and this is very interesting that he came. I think in the year 400 or something like that, he came to Gondolin with his mother. So almost at the end, he wasn't there that long, and well, he slowly rose in power, and Turgon saw him as because Turgon just had Idril, he just had one daughter, and we know from the Numenoreans later on and all that mostly it were the sons that inherited the kingdoms and the titles and whatnot. Well, he had a problem. He just had a daughter. I mean, I would have assumed Idril would have married somebody, which she did, and he would then become the king and she the queen, like both ruling together,
and
whatever.
and this is where the start of the politics that I mentioned earlier comes in,
Yes.
because we've got two potential inheritors to the throne, and this
Yeah.
is the throne of Gondolin. This isn't the throne of the High King of the Noldor. So there
No.
isn't really a precedent for
Yeah.
inheritance, and you don't
Yeah.
get the sense that they've worked it out. So
They didn't
Moglin
work it out. Yeah.
is kind of the assumed to be
Yeah.
a natural successor, but when
Yeah.
Tuor comes in, there's a threat there.
Exactly. But what I find interesting is, and you have that in Numenor later on as well. So eh, all these men are interested in the queens. Obviously, Idril is very beautiful, and I really do think he unnaturally falls in love with his cousin, which, stay away from that, please.
Yeah, they are
Um,
first cousins as well.
yeah, first cousin,
They're
so
not
no.
second cousins. They're not twice removed, etc. They are first cousins, so it
First
is
cousin,
definitely
yes.
wrong.
It is very wrong, yes. But yeah, I would say he fell in love with her, but also there is the feeling of she would naturally be the queen after her father. I mean, the thing is, why would an immortal elf die? But then, it was wartime during the First Age. A lot of kings have died before him and elves, so why not? So I also do think that a part of him wanting Idril was he wanted the throne of Gondolin as well, and marrying Idril would have given him that right double. So his claim, like in many European houses, they did exactly the same. So the claim was stronger if you even married that woman. So
And when you say, I've heard you say before that the whole thing with the houses maybe inspired the houses in George R. R. Martin.
yes,
I think rather I would say that they both had the same inspiration of medieval feudal society,
yes,
because this is
yeah,
literally what happened in real history.
yes, of course. In
Um,
all the European houses during medieval and even later times, yeah, like
marrying into another family is seen as as an aggressive political move on some level.
yes, all these Plantagenet and House York, and they were literally all also first or second cousins. So I mean,
Mhm.
come on. Um. Anyway, so Meglin rises in power, and Tuor kind of. I'm sorry, my cat is like going crazy over here. She will now jump onto cardboard boxes. Okay, she stops because then that tower will fall like the tower in Gondolin. Spoiler. My cat is being my cat is being Gothmog here. Anyway,
Uh,
anyway,
Tolkien would approve of the comparison.
he hates cats. So anyway, so he rises in power and in statues, and I mean the House of the Mole very very like the king, and the king treats him like his son instead. Um, and then come two people, two humans. And I really like that now the aspect and the part of because before Gondolin, you don't even hear of humans. You hear in the Children of Hurin. This is the story about the downfall of a human house and a human dynasty. But the fall of Gondolin, till then, they're literally like humans don't play any role. It's just about elves.
Well, I mean, they do before the fall, but I
Yeah,
suppose
yeah, but
that's part of the same storyline, though, really, isn't
that's
it?
that
It's
story
just
of
what
Hurin
happens
and
with
Hur.
Hurin, and yeah, in the battle and everything. That's
Yes, exactly.
kind of sets up what happens, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Um,
And they come to Gondolin in the year 460-ish, so just a bit after Meglin comes there. And they were brought by the eagle, so they didn't actually discover the city, but the eagles brought them there. So this is their argument later on to be able to leave, because they said, we don't even know the way, like some eagle
mm,
brought me here. Thorondor.
mm.
So again, sent by Manwë probably, and they bring the two humans there, and now the fate of the humans, and so the houses of the humans and the fate of the humans now are interwoven into the story of the fall of Gondolin. And this is so cool because I will read now from I'll tell a bit more about the story, but then I'll read a super epic line, because I was telling you guys before. I mean, there's the curse of Morgoth, on the house of Húrin. He was also in Gondolin, but that's the story of the children of Húrin. And there is also Huor's house. And there's a prophecy about that house as well. And Melkor, maybe you can tell the story, Dan. So what does Melkor fear? What does he know about these humans, about that house of the humans and Gondolin?
Well, he fears Tuor, and I mean, I don't know if we know why he fears him, but I don't actually know what you're alluding to. You might have to explain.
Oh, yeah. Well, Melkor knows that from the house and from that line, his downfall. So from the city of Gondolin, he knows that will create his downfall. He knows a prophecy that from the house of Fingolfin and obviously Tuor and the city of Gondolin, his downfall will come. So obviously he always wanted to find the city, first of all, but he knew that Turgon was actually his greatest enemy. It was not Feanor, which you could assume it was Feanor, or Fingolfin, or anyone else. It was Turgon. So yeah, super. I think I'm very often saying Tuor and Turgon. I'm not confusing them, but I think I said a few times. So Turgon is the king, Tuor is the human. I'm very sorry, but these names are so similar, and I'm talking very fast, and it's very late. Let me read a quote from the Quenta Silmarillion. And it is, and most of all, his kin Morgoth feared Turgon. For of old in Valinor his eye had lighted upon him, and whenever he drew near a shadow had fallen on his spirit, foreboding that in some time that yet lay hidden, from Turgon ruin should come to him. So Morgoth knew this prophecy from back in the days in Valinor. And yeah, I mean, obviously he was his greatest foe, because from his line would somebody come that would lead to his downfall. So first of all, he wanted to find the city and to prevent anyone coming from that line.
Mm-hmm. And Gondolin was the last kind of hidden stronghold of the elves that he never conquered. Yes. After it survived after the Nirnaeth, where everything else fell.
Yes. Definitely. So let me read.
Of course, he's going to have a vendetta there, because it's the last stronghold of elvendom.
Yes. And now it is a really cool part in the Silmarillion, which is not the fall of Gondolin, but something happens before. And this is literally one of the most tragic battles. It was the fifth battle, one of the most tragic battles of all ages, happens. And so many great characters we know die in that battle. So many elves die. Literally, the house of Húr and Húrin dies, like the men of Dolomin, and many of them die. And yeah, it is very gruesome how Tolkien there are different versions of the battle, as well as of the fall of Gondolin. And
it's the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, which I think from the name you can tell, if you know the story of the Silmarillion, from the name you can tell it's a real kind of not just because the name says that it's a moment of great sorrow, but it's a direct reference to the doom of Mandos, the first
Unnumbered
line.
Tears ye shall shed.
Ye shall shed. So they've named it after the curse of the Noldor. So it's the Noldor kind of realizing that they are doomed.
And the Noldor really thought that they could win this battle, and they could have if Morgoth wouldn't have convinced some men to fight for him and turn against the elves.
You see how things take a downward spiral, because we started out talking about the dream of Ulmo and that period. After the what's that feast called?
When Meglin they all invited.
Fingolfin invites everybody to like a kind of diplomatic event, which is a feast of reuniting. I don't remember the Elvish name for it, but it's kind of right at the start after the the first initial battles. It's the event where the Sindar are invited. Thingol doesn't come because he's a dick. But the Sindar are invited there, and Círdan is there, and all the Noldor are there. Well, some of the sons of Feanor don't show up either, but
this is where the Union from Medros,
at that point that they are happy that they listened to Feanor. They all think that they did the right thing.
Yeah. But this is where the Union from Medros later comes from, I would say.
Which doesn't work out, and then the battle happens, and they name it after the Doom of Mandos, which just tells you how things are flipped.
Yeah, and so let me read from that passage because it's really cool. And I mean, we just said Helen doesn't like dwarves, but the dwarves of Belegost are
you've got to like these dwarves. You gotta like
these dwarves and their iron masks. And this is like so cool. I mean, those are the dwarves I really like. So this is like in the middle of the battle. The battle was about few days long. It was not just one battle, actually. So this is in the middle of the battle, I think day 3 or something like that. So last of all, the eastern force to stand firm were the dwarves of Belegost, and thus they won renown. For the Naugrim, another name for dwarves, withstood fire more hardily than either elves or men, and it was their custom, moreover, to wear great masks in battle, hideous to look upon. And
in our opinion, as elven narrators, hideous.
Probably, yes. Well, and it was blah 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 blah, and those stood them in good stead against the dragons. This is now really important because those iron masks literally shield them from dragon fire, and nobody was prepared for those bloody dragons. That was a
how clever were those dwarves? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, they were. Okay, I give you that. Blah, blah, blah. And but for them, Glaurung and his brood would have withered all that was left of the Noldor. But the Naugrim made a circle about him when he assailed them, and even his mighty armor was not foolproof against the blows of their great axes. So they don't just come in mass, they also have great axes. And when in his rage Glaurung turned and struck down Azagal, lord of Belegost, and crawled over him with his last stroke, Azagal drove a knife into his belly, and so wounded him that he fled the field, and the beasts of Angband in dismay followed after him. Then the dwarves raised up the body of Azagal and bore it away, and with slow steps they walked behind, singing a dirge in deep voices, as it were a funeral pomp in their country, and gave no heed more for their foes, and none dared to stay then. I mean, the dwarves left, but still, epic what they did and how they protected the Noldor. So
they even left in kind of an awesome way as well, though, didn't they?
Yeah. Okay, I mean, this is the passage I really like about dwarves. Okay, but let's go on, because now a really important part comes. But now in the western battle, Fingon and Turgon were assailed by a tide of foes thrice greater than all the forces that was left to them. Gothmog, lord of bellrocks, that bloody Gothmog, seriously, people, high captain of Angband, was come, and he drove a dark wedge between the elven host surrounding King Fingon, and thrusting Turgon and Húrin aside towards the fen of Serech. Then he turned upon Fingon. Oh, this is so sad. That was a grim meeting. At last Fingon stood alone with his guard dead about him, and he fought with Gothmog until another Balrog came behind and cast a thong of fire about him. So this is really important, but some people don't really know that he maybe wouldn't have lost to Gothmog, but there was literally another Balrog coming in.
Maybe it was Durin's Bane. We'll never know, but
yeah. Good theory.
No evidence really, but it could be.
Then Gothmog hewed him with his black axe, and a white flame sprang. So again, black and white, all these really cool images, sprang up from the helm of Fingon as it was cloven. Thus fell the high king of the Noldor, and they beat him into the dust with their maces, and his banner blue and silver they trod into the mire of his blood. The field was lost, but still Húrin and Húr and the remnant of the house of Haldor stood firm with Turgon of Gondolin, and the host of Morgoth could not yet win the pass of Sirion. Then Húrin spoke to Turgon, saying, "Go now, Lord, while time is, for in you lives the last hope of the elder, and while Gondolin stands, Morgoth shall still know fear in his heart." But Turgon answered, "Not long now can Gondolin be hidden, and being discovered, it must fall." Foreshadowing, y'all. Then Hur spoke and said, "Yet, if it stands but a little while, then out of your house shall come the hope of elves and men. This I say to you, Lord, with the eyes of death, through we part here forever." Oh, this is so sad. "And I shall not look on your white walls again. From you and from me a new star shall arise. Farewell." Oh, isn't it so cool?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's the Battle of Unnumbered Tears because the reader is probably crying.
I'm almost crying because it's so sad. It's so sad, but then it is also so beautiful because again, it is foreshadowing the birth of one of, well, the most underwritten characters because Tolkien loved him so much, and I know you
Yeah.
also love. Yeah, and so Eärendil, obviously the star of Eärendil, we're talking about the birth of Eärendil, which comes from the house of Turgon.
The first character that Tolkien ever conceived of, from what we can tell.
Yeah, for all these stories, well, yeah, he was one of the first characters. The Voyages of Eärendil, I think it was a North mythology poem or something like that, or Anglo-Saxon
I think it was
poem.
an Anglo-Saxon poem.
It was an Anglo-Saxon poem, yeah. And,
which also mentions Middle Earth, Midgard, basically.
Midgard, yeah, exactly. And so this is such a cool passage, and it foreshadows everything that will later on come. And from that line, Eärendil does not just defeat Morgoth. From the line of Eärendil come the kings of Númenor. He's the ancestor. He's father of Elrond and Elros. It is so important that this child is born, and this is exactly what this passage says. Gondolin just had to survive just a bit longer, and both of them knew this. So they knew Gondolin would fall, but it just needed to survive a little bit longer so Eärendil could be born, to their house.
Well, the whole storyline on some level is an origin story for the planet Venus, really, isn't it? The whole thing is just is leading up to Eärendil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Originally in the Book of Lost Tales version, which I've referred to several times now.
Because you're just reading it.
Yeah, and you were talking about what was Melkor? What was he afraid of? What he was afraid of was Eärendil, and in the Book of Lost Tales, he's very much a prophesied figure, and it's very, very clear, and it's even more so than in the Silmarillion. Yeah. In the Silmarillion, you get this vague notion of it being kind of definitely or almost certainly like ordained and preordained and predestined, and you see that with the armor, which we haven't mentioned.
This will come into
Yeah, I think we'll get to that, but you definitely know that this is all preordained in the Silmarillion version, but in the Book of Lost Tales version, it's incredibly clear that Eärendil is almost like Middle-earth's Messiah figure.
Yeah, the promised one. Yeah, he kind of fulfills the role of which maybe Fëanor could have had, but yeah, he is in a way, and
maybe if Fëanor didn't fall and Arda wasn't marred, you don't need an Eärendil,
exactly. Yeah. But that would make a very boring story. So no, but the thing about Tolkien is very often that those characters he actually loved the most, he never finished, because he wanted him to be perfect. He wanted this character where it all started. He wanted him to be exactly like he wanted him to be, but that was so hard to write and put him
Yeah.
into this story. This is why we have so many little fragments of the Earendel story, but no finished one.
Yeah, there's a version of the Elendil story where he the stream isn't about him, but let's go with it. Elendil actually kills Ungoliant. There's a
Yes.
version of the story where that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
So, in the Silmarillion, Ungoliant, we're just told that she just goes into the mountains and eventually she eats herself, which, is kind of fitting.
Yeah.
But it's somewhat unsatisfactory because you want her to die, screaming at the blade of some angry elf.
Really? No, I think it's so cool that she's literally eating. I think that's way cooler.
Yeah, they both work in different ways.
Yeah, but they're killing enough bellrocks and dragons, so it's cool that she is an entity that, goes into nothing again. She came from nothing, she disappears into nothing again.
Yeah, like I said, it's fitting. It's fitting.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
I'm not saying it's not a
Yeah.
good resolution for her, but
But
yeah.
before Earendil and after this battle, we learn that during the year of the battle, actually, somebody, and I always said Tur, I think before, somebody was born. And that somebody was Tur. Yes, and he was from the same house like Turin, from the other brother. They were brothers, Hurin and Hur, or were they cousins? No,
Turin and Huor were brothers, yeah.
brothers, right? Yeah, exactly.
Turin and Tuor were cousins.
Cousins, first cousins, exactly. Yeah. So, we learned about Vinyama before, right? And his father died because, spoiler, more people died. Hurin made it out, and Morgoth captured him and then cursed him because Hurin he didn't tell him anything, and he stood very tall in front of the Dark Lord and said, well, you can say whatever you want, I'm not going to tell you anything. And he was not impressed. And he was, but you know what I mean. Morgoth put a curse on his family and made him watch the downfall of his own family from a mountaintop. Like, oh my God. So that is the other part, that is the children of Hurin. But now this part is that he was an orphan because his mother also went, I think, to the battleground, and she died grieving or something like that. So he was an orphan as well. And he came at a young age to Vinyama. And now Ulmo again. And he met somebody there. And now Ulmo again interferes, I think.
He meets Voronwë, is it?
Voronwë, yes.
Yeah. He was a survivor of a voyage that Turgon had sent out. He sent 7 ships to try and seek Valinor. Yes. So he had already had the idea that Elendil has later on, and tried to reach Valinor but failed.
Yeah.
But he sends other people, and Voronwë is the only survivor.
Exactly. So all the ships wrecked, and because the way was closed, Valinor shut itself up from the world, from the fate of the world. They were no longer really, really interested, and they held Caraxa. All the passages were gone, right? So you couldn't reach Aman. But like you said, I think it is a bit like the Arthurian legend. Only the one really worthy of the sword can pull it. This is how I felt about this story. Like, Bronwyn didn't die, but none of them made it to probably
to use a popular culture reference that people will definitely get, Thor's hammer in Marvel.
Sorry, yes, it just shows how old I am.
No, not at all. I think people know what King Arthur is as well too. But.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, at least the geeky people who stayed on till now. Yes, but this said Tur. he got a, like, Ulmo talked to him again, and he told him, I want to fast forward this now because this story will never end otherwise. He tells him, pick up, oh my god, we forgot to say that before Turgon left an armor, basically a
Yeah.
shield, a helmet, and an armor, I think.
Yeah, so this is way back when Olmo appeared to Turgon the second time. He
Yes.
tells him to leave an armor
Yeah.
and weapons for somebody who's going to need it in the future,
Yeah.
basically. And this is the somebody.
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah,
And he gives, I think he gives the measurements as well. So literally the armor is like tailored to fit
yeah.
Tuor.
Yeah, and he tells him a prophecy, and he tells him that, well, Gondolin will fall and they need to leave the city now, basically, otherwise they will all die. And again, he wants to help them and aid them. But now comes into play, and he makes it to Gondolin, because Voronwe knows the way to Gondolin, and people in Gondolin know Voronwe, so he can enter. And all these incidents, like happy incidents. And Voronwe and him reach the city, and he comes there and tells Turgon of the information from the Valar. Very helpful information.
So this is one of my questions, actually. And finish your bit, and then I'll jump in.
No. Yeah, I wanted to say, that Turgon was he became proudful because he made it out of the Nirn. Was that your question?
Well, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of related to that. So as we said earlier, this is all predestination. This is all stuff that Ulmo kind of knew from the music that this was going to happen.
Yeah.
Or maybe, Mando slipped him a note and he got it from him.
An eagle brings a note.
But it's certainly, like, this is all part of the plan, and the Valar have definitely told, Tuor to Turgon to put that armor there for Tuor later. And so they knew that this was going to happen. And it certainly seems that they knew that Eärendil would be coming later. Mm-hmm. So this is all planned, but then they send Tuor as a messenger to Gondolin, and his message is, you have to leave, you have to escape, you have to vacate the city because the fall of Gondolin is coming, and there's not much time left. So they knew that was about to happen, but then he doesn't listen. Yeah. So it's clear that this is like a gap in their knowledge. It would seem,
Yes, but I do think,
because he doesn't listen. He doesn't listen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The thing is, he always listened before, right? He listened to the dreams, he listened to the other prophecies, he was very willing to accept what they told him. But this is just like, I have this feeling it's like Beren standing in front of Morgoth and cutting one Silmaril, and then was like, why not take the second one? And then he took the second one. And I really do think, he felt, oh my god, maybe my city is in, like, this is really strong. We withstood so much. I withstood, and I made it out of the Nirnath and Nörias as one of the only ones, and I'm still strong. I have a strong army and everything. Maybe I can stay in my city. And there is a passage.
He keeps that attitude until the end, doesn't he? Because he goes down with the city. The city goes down in flames, and he won't leave. Then.
And there's a passage. And I don't think I have it here. It's a passage, and I think Manwë or somebody tells him, don't love the work of your hands too much. Something like that. It will lead to your downfall. There is one. I can't find it now, but there is a passage when they are still in Valinor, I think, he tells Turgon this. So, is this very similar to Fëanor? What did they tell Fëanor? Why don't you give up you created these great, amazing objects, but we need it now. But he didn't want to give up, and this is very similar. He doesn't want to give up the labor, and he I think it's that, and it's a prophecy he heard before, but it's also like he thinks he's a bit invincible, maybe.
Well, he's
Yeah.
not,
He's not.
as we'll find out.
Yeah. Exactly, because his sister brought. By the way, the sister died. Long story. The husband came to the city, and found them, and he wanted to kill the son because the son didn't want to go with him and leave with him. Obviously, nobody actually was allowed to leave. Then he didn't want to stay with an older king. I mean, I kind of get that, but yeah. So he wants to kill his own son. Again, very unelven, like this whole tragic family thing is very.
It's very Oedipus. The
Yes,
storyline, isn't it?
it's very Greek. The whole Noldor plotline is Greek mythology. It literally is.
Mm.
And so yeah, so he throws a poisoned knife, spear, whatever that was, and he wants to kill his son, but his wife springs in front, like jumps in front of the child and Meglin, and saves him, and she is they don't know that this was poisoned, and she was better, and then she died out of this poison. So then he kills Eol. The king throws down, or somebody does, Eol, the dark elf, from the city walls, and Eol curses his own son, saying, "You will have the same fate." Again, another curse. I mean, this is so epic, people. So you will have the same fate, and which he actually does. Spoiler. And yeah, so that's wrap up that storyline. Yeah. So.
So now we
Uh,
have to work our way back to the fall of Gondolin again.
Yes, yes. And yeah, well, he arrives in the city, and as you said before, he falls in love with Idril, and she, again, this is one of the only times a human falls in love with an elf. And again, like you said before in our other stream, he marries up. I mean, he is from a good house, but he's not a king's son, and he's not an immortal elf. But the cool thing about Turgon is he's totally fine with that. He's very similar to his cousin, who's also very friendly with humans. Finrod loves
Yeah.
the humans, and he even gives his life to aid Beren, and to aid his house because he owes them. But still, you feel that Turgon, because I mean, again, Thingol was very different.
Yes, he was.
Um, but
Thingol, to be fair to him, changes a little bit on that one,
he does later on.
but it takes a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, like somebody losing an arm and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so you feel this is very different. Like he really likes that, and he fostered, Hurin and Hur before. He really
I
likes
I
humans.
think I know why as well. I think it's out of due respect to Tuor being,
Yes,
the
from the
messenger of
house.
the Valar.
Yeah,
I think it's the Valar, but he's very loyal to the
yeah,
Valar, and this goes back to why he never wanted to leave Valinor in the first place,
yeah,
because he was a loyal
yeah,
subject of Manwë and the
yeah.
Valar.
And obviously, he knows, or he learns from which house that man is from. And then obviously, Turgon must be like, "Oh, this all makes sense now."
Indeed.
um, yeah, so because we just read about the prophecy, from your and my line will come the star, blah blah blah. So he's fine with them falling in love, and they do. And Meglin is not happy about that. And now one of my favorite characters, Idril, she knows that Meglin is not to be trusted, and she builds a tunnel out of the city, which is also very Greek tragedy,
Yeah.
escape of Troy.
Yeah, you
Um,
told me once this is literally from the Fall of Troy.
yeah, how Aeneas and all of them escaped. Yeah.
Mm, mm.
And so, yeah, so she, in secret, so Meglin doesn't know, builds a tunnel. This will come in very handy later on. And yeah, so things go on and everything looks good. Turgon, probably happy. My daughter married good guy. They have a child. And in the year 510 or something like that, just to fast forward it a bit, something happens. Meglin gets captured by orcs or whatever. He's out there. He's always leaving Gondolin, which
Mm.
again, how is that allowed?
See, I have another question. Yeah, is my exact question is why is that allowed?
I don't know.
Because Turgon says that he's going to shut his doors at this point.
I know.
When Tuor arrives, he shuts his gates.
I don't know. Did he do that in secret? I don't know if
But
it was
special treatment for Maglin, you know.
Maybe he convinced him, because I very much feel that
and
Meglin is whispering in the king's ear.
Yeah, he is. He is trusted, isn't he?
Yeah,
The king trusts him
yeah,
completely.
yeah.
You know, his
To be
downfall.
fair, he was not out there looking for Morgoth, right? It wasn't
No.
that. I think he wanted to do business with dwarves or something like that.
Mhm.
So which he often did. He was friends like his father with the dwarves, and he learned a lot from the dwarves. He did learn prior to this. He was actually really gifted in craftsmanship as well.
Mm-hmm. Just
And
like his
yeah,
father.
just like his father. Yeah.
We mentioned the sort of sword that his father made, the
Yes.
talking sword.
Talking.
His father made that. That's how good of a craftsman he was.
Yes.
Um,
And he gets captured by Morgoth and tortured. And Morgoth promises him something. He promises him the girl and the city. This is literally everything he always wanted, right? So he says yes. I mean, how naive can you be? But okay. Um, and he comes back and is like, oh, nothing happened, Morgoth. Who? Um, and I think they have a feast or something at that night in Gondolin. And Erendil at that time was already born. He was around 7, I think, something like that. He wasn't
any
old.
time the first age elves have a feast, you know, just watch out
Something else, I
because
know.
something awful is going to happen.
Yeah, even in Amman, even there,
Exactly. Yeah.
things. Yeah, so
That was the darkening
never.
of Valinor, where they having a feast.
Yeah,
And like,
never have those parties. Even in the Hobbit, didn't the Woodland realm, didn't they have Thranduil's people? I think they had a feast when they discovered Thorin and his company anyway. So yeah, they had a party going on, and then Morgoth did strike, and he learned before Hurin being there, blah, blah. I don't want to go too deep into this, but he knew now where Gondolin was.
mm,
And so he struck with his full might, with his full army, with dragons, with bellrocks. Like, this is gruesome, people, what
mm.
happened to the city. He literally came. They were not prepared. It wasn't even a fair battle. They were not prepared. And he had flying. Imagine a city. A city can defend itself, even, not being super prepared. Like Gondolin, it would be, but I mean,
But they
there were
don't. Yeah,
dragons.
there was Morgoth had air support, you know, and
Exactly. The thing is,
and
I don't think they
the
had wings
eagles
at
don't
that
get the
time.
eagles don't get involved, do they? Or
No, I don't think so. No,
um,
not in that version. And I think they weren't winged at that time, but they could climb like the walls and everything. And the Balrogs, I don't know. Can Balrogs fly? I don't really know. But it was no. Okay.
that's my opinion. You know, this has plagued Tolkien fans for generations. It's
Yeah.
can do Balrogs have wings?
Yeah.
I think the general consensus is that they
I
probably
would
don't.
also say no. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but you know,
Anyway.
John Howe famously drew one with wings, and now we have movies with Balrogs who have wings, and now everybody
Yeah.
thinks the Balrogs look like that. So.
Yeah. I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't depict them with wings. And the thing is, even the dragons evolved, and then later, because we had a stream about Glaurung, right? And
Yeah.
so
Well,
he mixed.
these were Glaurung's children. It says in the
They were the
Silmarillion
children. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
they were the
exactly.
children of Glaurung,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
could mean that they're descendants of. That doesn't mean that they're
Yeah.
necessarily.
But he mixed other creatures with the then worm or whatever. And then they had wings later on, whatever. But yeah, it was, I mean, Gondolin would fall. That was pretty clear. And the fight is really, really epic, because I told you guys before there were all these epic warriors, and this is a really good fight. They gave these balrogs and dragons and whatnot and armies. And let me just read. This is almost at the end. And this is from the Fall of Gondolin, so the standalone book, which is actually really, really beautiful. If you I have this version, oh, this is like really shiny. I'm sorry. And here you see Ulmo and Turgon standing there. It's really cool.
Two all.
Tour. I'm sorry, like this is ridiculous. Can he please have a new name? Yeah, but it's really cool. It's beautiful illustrations in that book. It's my least favorite book to read, though, I must say. Like, Children of Húrin is the best book to read. Then Beren and Luthien, and this book is horrible to read, actually. But they're good passages because it's like scribbles and Christopher explaining. Yeah, I'm not a fan, but I mean,
and the best version of the story is unfinished as well. The best version of the story is the version where Tuor just arrives in Gondolin and then it just stops. And
yeah.
Tolkien, my dude, can you just answer less letters and just finish this?
Thank you very much. Plus the Erendil story, please. If we'll ever make a time machine, we will go back and tell him that, and I'll bring the book and I'll be like, "This is not good. Make it happen." Okay. No, I love the book. I mean, don't get me wrong, people, but you know. So let me read. This is almost at the end. This is in the midst of the battle. Now it is that Tuor and the men of the wing, this is his house, fare into the fight and range themselves beside Ecelion and those of the fountain. And the twain strike mighty blows and ward each many a thrust from the other, and harry the orcs. Like, seriously, this language is ridiculous. Harry the orcs, like what are these words anyway? So so this is like reading Shakespeare. So that they win back almost to the gate. But there behold a quaking and a trampling, for the dragons labor mighty at beating a path up Aman Gwareth. I think that is the path leading there. And casting down the walls of the city, and already there's a gap therein and a confusion of masonry where the ward towers have fallen in ruin. Bands of the Swallow of the Arch of Haven, this is another house, there fight bitterly amid the wreck of Orcuntus, the walls to east and west with a foe. But even as Tuor comes nigh driven the orcs. Seriously, people, this is I don't even want to read it. I read it before and it was okay. It's really horrible to read it out loud because it doesn't make sense and I just ignore some words. But okay, let's see. And this doesn't speak for me as a Tolkien scholar.
My favorite thing in the Book of Lost Tales language is instead of saying the word spoke, is every time we say spoke, we say spake.
Yeah.
You know, like can't you just
and the thing is, I'm German. Like, English is another language, and this is like another language. Like, what? Okay, but where can we? Because this is a really cool passage. But yeah, okay. Let's just read this passage. Thus comes the last stout gathering of those defenders in the square of the palace of Turgon. Among them are many wounded and fainting, and Tuor is weary of the labors of the night. So this battle happened throughout the night. And the weight of Ecelion, who is in a deadly swoon. So, spoiler, Ecelion dies. Even as he led the battalion in by the road of archers from the north and west. This makes sense when you look at the map of the city. And they had marched. This is like really bad. I'm sorry, people. I'm not even drunk. And they had marched Addo to prevent any foe getting behind their backs. A noise arose at the eastward of the square. And Glorfindel is driven in with the last of the men of the Golden Flower. Now these had sustained a terrible conflict in the great market to the east of the city, where a force of orcs led by bellrocks came on them at unawares as they marched by a whatever way to fight about the gate. This they did to surprise the foe upon his left flank, but were themselves ambushed. This is another word, I'm just saying ambushed. Therefore, they bitterly for hours till a fire drake. So now come the fire drake. Now come from the breach, overwhelmed them, and Glorfindel cut his way out very hardily and with few men. And this literally goes on and on and on. And yeah, in the end,
You've read some of that bit before when we covered Glorfindel.
yes. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, but I mean, this is like really ridiculous language. So, okay.
yeah, the Book of Lost Tales language, it does kind of
I know.
interfere at times, doesn't it?
Yeah, so people, but don't be afraid. Like the Silmarillion is not like that. The Silmarillion is better written, and I mean the Lord of the Rings anyway. I mean there is some antique words, but it's nothing like that. When I read that, I was like, Christopher, like, come on. Anyway, so what happened?
It's Tolkien's very, very early writings, though, isn't it? It's not Christopher.
Yes. Yeah, but he could have like put it in English, whatever. Anyway, this was not.
To be fair to him, he does put like a glossary of old words.
He does, yeah.
Like
yeah, but I'm not like turning
obsolete words.
I know, but I'm not turning pages to understand something. This is like no. So this was not my best moment, people. Please forgive me. Anyway, carry on. So what happens next? Now something really tragic happens. The king dies. Not Turgon, the king dies. And it's very symbolic how both die. How Exelion, he drowns in his own fountain. He's the house of the fountain, right? He drowns in the fountain. And Tur is, well, the tower of the king crashes upon him and kills him. And this reminds me a lot. We talked about Finrod dying. Finrod did die on the Isle of the Werewolves, but he did build the tower he died in before.
Yeah, it's Tolkien.
Yes, so he built the tower he died in, and now, the king who didn't want to leave his city he built is slain and dies by a crashing tower, his tower, the tower of the king.
So this ties in with the quote that you mentioned earlier on about the
labor of your hands.
Don't be too overproud of the labor of your own hands, or whatever it is.
Which is very symbolic. And he was a good overall. I mean, we're still talking about Turgon here. He was a good guy. He was really a good. There was even this proud moment. You can forgive him that, because the role he played and the way he listened to the Valar most of the time. I mean, we all make one or two mistakes in our lives. Some more, some less. But
he definitely fits into the tragic hero category, doesn't he? Rather than anything else. And I always think that there are two different shades of tragic hero. There are sympathetic tragic heroes, and there are unsympathetic ones. Yeah, possibly, yes.
No, Turin is not sympathetic.
Your
Turin
mileage may vary. I have some sympathy for Turin, but only some. I mean, he's even in a grey area between the two, you could argue. But yeah, Turgon definitely a sympathetic tragic hero who meets a tragic end, and he's tied in with a curse that is beyond his reckoning to effect. Really,
in a way, it is. Yes, exactly.
He's drawn into events beyond his control, and he dies a tragic death.
Yeah,
going down in flames with his city, and it's the greatest city that ever existed in Elvendom, and it's very sad.
Yeah, that it no longer is, and this is how very often in like when Beleriand drowned and everything. So it is very, all these kingdoms did fall. Numenor, like all these kingdoms, they are no longer, and the world is reshaped in a way. Nargothrond did fall, Gondolin did fall. Yeah, they're very poetic. But yes, as you said, he had a very important role to play. He knew that, and he never wanted, I never feel he was one of those Noldorian princes who wanted to become king. I mean, he founded this kingdom, but it was again due to somebody telling him this. I think
Hmm.
he would have been okay to stay in Vinyamar, maybe, and live his days out there with Idril and
Yeah.
his
Well,
folk
he founded Vinyamar right on the coast, and I think the reason for that
to
is
be close to
because
the Valar.
because he wanted to be close to the Valar
Yeah,
and wanted to be close to the water and
yeah,
and
yeah.
so on. Because he never wanted to leave in the first place,
No, yeah,
which is the tragedy of Turgon.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. And I think it is so symbolic that this line, so the line of Fingolfin and, well, Turgon's line then later on, and his offspring, that they in a way ended the curse of Mandos, and
Mm,
not none of the Fëanorians, right? It was the other side of the family. Some of them got killed, some didn't make it, but Turgon also didn't make it, but Earendil did, his
mm,
grandson, and it is cool that, and even Fingolfin getting the not kill, he didn't kill Morgoth, but he didn't, he hurt him,
mm.
and he always had that wound and everything. None of the Fëanorians get that, those moments. They don't get these
No,
moments. They don't get these great moments.
no,
um
they sometimes they're involved in them in a sympathetic way, like
yeah,
Maedhros being rescued by Fingon.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they never really the heroes, are they?
No, no.
Though I
um
mean, the Feanorians are either in that other category of tragic hero that is thoroughly unsympathetic.
yeah,
I think apart from maybe Maglor,
yeah,
or they are just terrible villains, really.
yeah,
um, and and the rest of the family gets dragged along with them, which is where all the tragedy comes from.
yeah, yeah, it is. But yeah, so that was that character.
Hmm.
Do you have anything else to add? I think we covered most of it. We
I
actually,
think we were very thorough, even if we were a bit scattershot in terms of the chronology of things, because
yeah,
we jumped back and forth a bit, but we always do, and people follow anyway, so
it's fine. It's
it's all
fine,
good.
people. Yeah,
Yeah, great character, great storyline.
yeah,
First of all, I mean, it's just he's a character who is wrapped up in all the big events, and
yes.
like you say, he's not thoroughly tied in with the Silmarils, which
No,
is
he's not,
interesting.
which is cool. Yeah.
He never lusted after the Silmarils personally. He never
No,
desired them that we're told about.
no. Because
He
even Thingol in a way did, right? And he was
I
not,
think I'll definitely did, yeah.
Thingol was not even from, he was I mean, he was in Valinor once, but then he
Mm,
never left Beleriand again, and he lusted after them, even somebody who was not really a Noldor.
mhm.
So his fate was interwoven in that curse, but you feel that Turgon never was.
No, no. Well, I mean, it was all tied in with the same storyline, but
It
no, he
was, yeah,
wasn't.
yeah,
There wasn't really a strong
no,
correlation between
yeah, yeah,
his fate and
yeah,
his kind of doom and the doom of
yeah,
the Silmarils. It just
and maybe that's why the Valar, were happy to aid later Earendil. And I mean, we touched on that a bit earlier, but
mm,
why Ulmo wanted to help him as well, because we know, Ulmo loved the Teleri. And yeah, so
mm, mm.
anyway, I really like this. Dan,
Mhm.
tell us what is next on your channel. I think we have something really cool coming up. Can we tease this or
No, we can
secret?
announce it. We can tell everything.
Okay.
I'm going to be releasing a trailer for it in the next few days. We are just over a week away from Tolkien Reading Day, which is one of the two big events of the Tolkien calendar.
Mhm.
Every year, the Tolkien Society announces a theme for Tolkien Reading Day, and the idea of the event is to promote the reading of Tolkien. So traditionally, people read passages from Tolkien, and the theme for this year is hope and courage, I think.
Yeah.
Or yeah, I think that's right. And so for the Tolkien YouTubers, I'm organising the playlist for everybody, and I'll be releasing a trailer probably after this comes out, because I imagine you're going to upload this tomorrow. But so this week there'll be a trailer for it, but the event will be open to everybody to take part. And I myself am covering the Helm's Deep chapter from The Lord of the
Really
Rings.
cool chapter, yeah.
And I'm working with an illustrator friend of mine on that as well. So I've done a I think very good dramatic reading of the last few pages of the chapter.
Very different from my read.
I've done a few voices. I've done orc voices in a kind of pseudo Cockney orcish accent from
I'm here for that.
from the Peter Jackson movies, which you've had a preview of. And so the last few pages leading up to the charge of Theoden and Aragorn and Gandalf appearing on the ridge, and cool. The rise of the day and the orcs being driven into the forest of Huorn.
Yeah, and then trampled to death.
Yeah, and then crushed and eaten by trees. So yeah, it's like one of the best moments in Lord of the Rings, and can't wait for people to hear it.
Yay! My topic will be, because I focus on the hope. No, I'm just kidding now, but it will be orcs, hopeful or hopeless. I'm just kidding, by the way.
Have you picked a topic? Do you want to announce your topic? Have you picked one?
I don't know a topic. Maybe it is orcs, hopeful or hopeless. Kind of like to talk about orcs.
Okay.
What else is going on in your life regarding Tolkien then?
So I'm carrying on with other series that I have on my channel. So I'm up to chapter 14 in the Silmarillion Explained series, which is my breakdown of the Silmarillion chapter by chapter, roughly. So chapter 14 is of Beleriand and its realms, which is probably most Tolkienists' least favourite Silmarillion chapter, which is just a boring list of places. So I will kind of make that more interesting, hopefully, for people. And I'll provide some visuals, and I'll add some maps.
Let me read parts of it. I'm just
No, I will not let you do that.
And the first reading was okay. I can actually read. It's just
you did well.
Stupid. It's stupid language.
It's late, and the language is difficult. So that's coming up, and I'm continuing my Numenor playlist, which I will have a breakdown of the geography of Numenor next as well. So I'll be talking about the populations of different areas and the different regions and that sort of thing. And I've got some other plans as well in the works that I'm kind of starting to figure out, which I won't go too much into, but I'm going to start doing some other special little videos that aren't as part of those different series. So that's what's coming up with me.
Just all these things, okay.
I'm moving house next weekend, so if there's not much full-on content this week, then don't think that I'm not going to come back strongly next week, because
Dan just disappeared. That's the rumor I will spread.
You will see a different backdrop behind me soon.
Yay!
Smaller room, unfortunately, but
cool. Yay! So thank you, Dan, for being here again. It's been a while, and
it's been that long. It's been 2 weeks.
I've been on your channel though, not on mine. And we will continue our epic warriors and baddies series. Baddie next.
Drop a like on the video and comment below your suggestions for our next character.
Right.
Be a villain, so it needs to be.
Yeah. Who do you want? And we have covered a few. We've covered Sauron. We've covered Glaurung. Who else did we cover baddie-wise? Did we do Fëanor?
No, we haven't. He's definitely, I would say, more leaning towards the villain side of things, and he's a warrior, so we could do him. That would be a good shout.
But leave a comment. What is your wish?
Definitely leave a comment. There are definitely ones we've not thought of.
No. Cool. Thank you very much for everybody still here, even after my reading. And bye-bye, my lovelies. Bye.